Hello again. This is the first part of my second video lecture on Derrida's Of Grammatology. In this second series, what I want to do is to follow up on some comments that were made in class, somewhat in defense of Derrida, well not somewhat, that were made in defense of Derrida's style and syntax in Of Grammatology. I want to challenge those defenses a little bit, but also um, push them a bit further, so that they can become maybe a bit more robust in our collective thinking about this book. The second thing I want to do is review chapter 1, because we didn't really get a chance to talk about its argument or its organization, and that hopefully will be a good refresher for you as you're reading chapters 2 and 3, not for this upcoming class, but for the following week. Also, I want to go over some important, in going over chapter 1, I want to go over some important terminology, including sign, signifier, signified, and also some of the key players that Derrida is both adopting as members of his own philosophical heritage, uh, but also those who he is simultaneously challenging and critiquing in this book. So the stuff about chapter 1 and about the concepts will have to wait a bit. I want to begin then this first lecture by this part of the second lecture actually by talking about his style and syntax again. One of the comments that was made in class, somewhat in defense of Derrida's obscure, obtuse, elliptical writing style, right? Long sentences, embedded phrases, embedded parenthetical clauses, a great gap, but often a great deal of distance between the subject and verb of a sentence, sometimes great distance between two subjects even that are both subjects of a sentence, and that so that what we have in Of Grammatology are these loaded sentences that take quite a bit of time to work through, and even if we do take our time with it, if we might still have no idea what Derrida is saying. So one of the things that was said in defense of this was that there is a potentially an alignment between the elliptical style of Derrida's sentences and his own sense being born in Algeria, born of Sephardic Jewish parents, educated in France, but with a fraught relationship to his educators and to the institutions in which he studied and in which he taught, that there is some kind of alignment between his style and syntax and his own personal, political, national, and ethnic or cultural sense of dislocation, the feeling that he has no single space or heritage to which he belongs. Now, I want to be very careful in this regard. I think it might be a bit too swift and too easy to align these things together without having earned it as readers yet. Now, the person who said it in class may have very well earned it on his or her own, but I think especially if we're new to Derrida or new to this book, or if we haven't read this book in its entirety, that sort of claim I think will have to be earned through a reading of the book. With that said, I think there are things to say already, even though we're not very far in the book, about Derrida's own sense of ethnic, national, cultural, personal, and biographical and historical dislocation, and some of the conceptual moves he makes at least in the excerpt that we read, and namely the alignment between logocentrism, which I went over in an earlier video lecture, and ethnocentrism. right? That for Derrida, these are very much the same, so that throughout the history of philosophy and anthropology, when philosophers and anthropologists um, write about writing, they bring with it all of this, all of these presumptions about the evolution and development of cultures, and they do it from within, right, a Western mindset that presumes that the most civilized nations and cultures will be those that have developed for themselves alphabetic forms of writing. Okay, and so we can see there Derrida already linking up his critique of the privileging of speech over writing, logocentrism, with you know the sort of ethnocentric impulses that often go with those privilegings. Okay, Derrida will pick up on this later, particularly I think at the beginning of the second part of this book, and in the subsequent chapters of the second part. Okay, so for those interested then in pursuing the relationship between Derrida's personal sense of dislocation and the argument or syntax and style of grammatology, that might be one fruitful area to pursue. The second thing I wanted to mention very quickly was I liked very much the argument that what makes Derrida's style and syntax often so difficult is not his attempt to willfully misconstrue and outpace us in his writing, but rather his overwhelming need to be precise. There is an almost urgent precision, according to this argument, in Of Grammatology. And I really like this, and I think we should take it seriously as readers of this book. And even on our own, when we're reading it, I want to challenge you to take a sentence or two, or even a paragraph, and really take some time going through it and asking yourself, why does Derrida put in this parenthesis? Why does he include these two adverbs when he doesn't seem like he would need to? What does all the ornamentation and elliptical patterns within his sentences, what do all of these contribute to the ideas he's attempting to pin down? Okay, so the reason that I like this idea so much is because it's a testable one. It's a quickly testable thesis, and one that we can maybe do in class together. Again, not this upcoming Wednesday, but the following Wednesday. So make a note to yourself about that in your own notebook, and while you're reading Derrida, try to find a sentence or a paragraph or a section that you would like to test this out with. Okay. The third thing, I think there is a little bit of debate about whether or not Derrida's style and syntax could be deemed narcissistic. That maybe the reason he's so difficult is because he's something of a narcissist. While I know there is a bit of backlash from some of the students more familiar with Derrida against that idea, playing the devil's advocate, I would simply say, so what? Right? That we, in studying English, what is it? Let's for a second take a step back and ask ourselves, what is it that we're studying when we study literature? Right? We study writing. Sorry, there's somebody going by outside. What are we studying? We're studying things that were written by men and women who spent a lot of time alone, and who took a great deal of effort to craft, various narratives or verses or plays or what have you. And often, why? To make a name for themselves, to, this is often a theme in Shakespeare's sonnets, to somehow live on in history long after his death, right? So, and then there's whole genres, right, of confessional poetry, autobiography, autobiographical epic poems, Wordsworth's Prelude, right, that are centered around the writer. And we could even say this about B.S. Johnson's, Christy Mallory's own double entry, that for B.S. Johnson, to write fiction was in some sense um, confessional. Now, to what degree we want to accept that description is certainly up for debate. But all I want to point out is that when we study philosophy, when we study literature, we are often studying solipsists, right? I don't want to necessarily call them narcissists because that suggests it's pathological. Um, but really, all I would do is point out the mundane fact that we're reading people who spent a lot of time alone, a lot of time in their own head, and a lot of time writing things down that they thought they had come up with, and things that they thought was important enough to share with other people, right? So if that's not a sign of solipsism, right, or a kind of solipsism, or a kind of self-aggrandizing performativity, let's say, I don't know what is. So to the accusation that Derrida's style can be a bit playfully performative, um, if you want to see in that a kind of narcissism or a kind of showing off of knowledge and literacy um, and expertise in the field of philosophy and the history of ideas, um, I'm perfectly open to that, and I'm okay with it. So, so I hope we can just agree to say, you know what, if he is sort of showing off, let him. But instead of getting mad about it or defending it, let's get at what he's doing, right? Let's really try to get at his argument and tease out and close read those performances to see if they are indeed food for thought. So, okay, I think that's pretty much all I wanted to say in this first part. And I'll only close by saying this, that the one thing I would caution against, is to let Derrida off the hook by simply saying that what he is doing is so new that of course the style and syntax is going to be difficult because he's struggling to articulate what he means, and that is somehow proof that what he's saying is worthwhile and new and novel and all of those things. Well, that might very well be true, right? While that might very well be true, I think that's a dangerous argument, right? Because it can be applied in all sorts of situations in which obscurity is championed in order to disguise, let's say, crueler intentions. Okay, so in any sense, that's all I wanted to say. I'm not saying Derrida has crueler intentions or suspicious intentions, but I would say that we should be wary about equating the difficult style of Derrida with novelty. Okay, or saying that his style is proof that what he's doing is somehow very innovative. Okay, all right. So okay, so I'll leave it there, but and continue on with chapter 1.